Chapter 14:30. The last meal some time later, Sonny was sitting on his opulent memory chair in front of a veritable feast of all kinds of delicious food. Better yet, it was all prepared by Nephi's. He was drooling from just looking at it. They were currently at the mess deck of the chain breaker. Sonny was sick and tired of the mist, so being away from it was already doing wonders for his mood. Because of the dimness of the outside world, the mess deck was illuminated by the warm light of luminous memories. The fragrance of his luxurious breakfast permeated the air. Nephi's was staring at him with a serious expression, her confusion hidden so well that no one except for him would have detected it. "You said that it was important, so I did my best." Sonny marveled at how endearing her seriousness was, then nodded and immediately picked up his chopsticks. Where to start? For a moment he was lost for choice. But only for a moment. Soon he was happily stuffing his face with several dishes at the same time. His table manners would make Fiend look like a gentleman in comparison. Nephi's, Cassie, and Jet stared at him incredulously. After a while, Jet let out a long sigh and asked, "Sonny, sorry to interrupt your meal, but aren't you going to explain what is going on?" He stopped chewing for a moment and glanced at her briefly. "I might." Then he asked sweetly, "Oh, can anyone pour me a cup of tea?" The teapot was right there in front of him, but what was the point of being pampered if he had to do everything himself? Nephi's blinked, confused. "Can't you do it yourself?" Sonny smiled. Considering that his cheeks had ballooned because of all the food in his mouth, his smile looked nothing short of ridiculous. "I can." There were a few moments of awkward silence. Then Nephi sighed and poured tea in a beautiful porcelain cup. "Here you go." Sonny nodded in gratitude and chased down the food with a sip of the bitter tea. Ah, shame there's no coffee anywhere in this tomb. He was enjoying his break quite a bit. The other three, however, seemed a little concerned. After a while, Nephi's cleared her throat and asked evenly, "So, are you going to tell us what is going on or not?" Sonny swallowed, took another sip of tea, and gave her a contemplative look. "Well, you see, how do I put it? I just wanted you to make me breakfast." Neff's usually motionless face seemed to twitch a little. But he was not done talking. His voice turned grave. "Because I don't have a lot of time left. I only have a day to live." She was suddenly pale. Jet's eyes widened. Cassie flinched. All three of them knew that Sonny could not lie, which meant that he was really going to die. "What?" Sonny nodded solemnly. "Yes, sadly it's true, I am going to die soon. It's inevitable and none of you can stop it. So I just wanted to spend a pleasant day with you guys, gals. Anyway, this breakfast is a good start." There was dead silence in the mess deck. Jet was frozen still. Cassie seemed petrified. Nephi's, however, slowly leaned over, raised a hand, and poked his face with a finger. Her voice trembled a little. He's not wearing the mask." Something fell to the floor with a loud noise. Sonny rubbed his cheek, blushed a little, and looked at Neph with reproach. "Right, now that we're past that, let's get back to food. It's getting cold." Saying that, he nonchalantly continued to stuff his face. A satisfied sigh escaped from his lips. After a few moments, he looked up and saw three beautiful women staring at him in stunned silence. Their faces were pale. Sonny sighed and raised an eyebrow. "What?" Cassie did not move. Furious white sparks ignited in the depths of Neff's eyes. But it was Jet who broke the silence first. "What do you mean, what? Do you expect to drop that bomb on us and continue eating as if nothing happened? What do you mean you are going to die? Why? Who is going to kill you? How do we prevent it?" It was probably the first time Sonny saw the infamous Soul Reaper Jet lose her composure. Well, disregarding the days she was crawling around their raft trying to eat him. But she had been much calmer even then. Nephi's opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Eventually, she simply pointed to Jet. Cassie nodded. "What Master Jet said." Sonny blinked a few times and put a confused expression on his face. "I mean, yes, do you expect me to let all this food go to waste? And I mean dying by going to die. A terrible nightmare creature is going to kill me. As for preventing it, there's no point, really. It is what it is." He reached for his tea and shook his head. "I don't get it. Why are you guys making a scene?" He basked in their comical expressions for a few moments, and then exploded with laughter. Oh, sorry, damn. I think I am starting to understand Effie better. This is really fun." Gulping down the tea, Sonny smiled and looked at his companions with mirth in his eyes. By now, they were thoroughly dumbfounded. He sighed. "Listen, I did not tell you before, but this whirlpool is actually a whirlpool of time. Time moves in a circle on this island, meaning this day repeats itself over and over." They stared at him silently. "What I mean to say is that all of us have been reliving the same day ever since arriving at Windflower. I'm just the only one who remembers the previous ones. I've died a few dozen times already trying to get us out, and I'll definitely die many more times before we finally escape this hellhole." His teeth gleamed in a cavalier grin. "What, did you think that dying would actually kill me?" Since his companions seemed to be having trouble with comprehending the nature of the time loop, Sonny explained it again, this time in detail. He wasn't hurried, and did not forget to thoroughly enjoy Neff's breakfast in the process. Luckily, Sonny already had rich experience of having this conversation, so he did it again with ease. His mood was quite good. When he was done, Nephi's, Cassie, and Jet glanced at each other. After a few moments of silence, Nephi's asked, "So although you are indeed going to die soon, you'll come back to life at the start of the next revolution, every time?" Sonny nodded. "Exactly." She looked down and took a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice sounded strange. "So what you mean to say is that we can kill you right now and you'll be fine tomorrow?" Sonny scratched his head. "I guess so, although it's a weird way to put it." Nephi's nodded, as if coming to a decision. Then she looked at Cassie and Jet. "So we're in agreement. He has to be killed, right?" Cassie and Jet nodded seriously. "Yes, of course. Let's not make it quick." Sonny blinked, this time out of sincere surprise. What? What do you mean, kill me?" Jet smiled leisurely as she slowly rose to her feet. "Why are you making a scene? We'll just kill you a little, for education purposes." Suddenly, a cold chill crept up his spine. Cassie and Nephi's were standing up, as well. Wait a minute. This has somehow gone terribly wrong. It was just a little joke. Today is supposed to be my day off, okay? Don't do anything rash." A small smile appeared on Neff's face, with dangerous sparks dancing in her eyes. "You don't have to worry, we won't rush." His 5 shadows observed the scene with a mix of disdain and pity. A few of them shook their heads dejectedly. Why are they so angry? After a moment the shadows winced. Loud sounds of something heavy crashing into the floor resounded from the mess deck of the chain breaker for a while after that. In the end, Sonny was not killed. However, he did receive a few bruises. Considering that his skin was not easy to bruise due to the marble shell, it went to show just how much his little stunt had angered the 3 women. Luckily, they calmed down pretty fast. Even luckier, Sonny had wisely finished his breakfast before drawing their ire. In the aftermath of his punishment, the mess deck was in complete disarray, and there was nothing edible left on the overturned table. The wrath of 3 infuriated masters was a frightening thing. I don't get it. It was just a little joke." Rubbing his sides resentfully, Sonny stared at Nephi's, Cassie, and Jet. Of course, he was smart enough to keep these thoughts to himself. Otherwise, a few bruises would be the least of his problems. His companions, in turn, were staring at the surrounding mess. "We should probably tidy up." Cassie's voice sounded uncertain. Jet gave her a glance and shrugged. "Won't it tidy itself up at the end of the day? Everything will go back to how it was." The blind girl hesitated. "Still, let's clean what we can now." Sonny was not really keen on cleaning on his day off, but he could always make Fiend do it for him. Before he did, however, Cassie suddenly said that he and Nephi should leave it to her and Jet. Neff was still suffering from the symptoms of essence exhaustion, while Sonny was supposed to be resting. So, the blind girl told them to go enjoy the dessert on the upper deck. Nephi seemed unconvinced, but Sonny was shaken. He remained silent for a while, then asked solemnly, "There's dessert." After that, the two of them were sent out of the devastated mess deck. Soon, Sonny found himself sitting in the shade of the sacred tree, having an improvised picnic with Neff. There was indeed dessert on a cloth in front of him, as well as another pot of freshly brewed tea. Drinking hot tea while surrounded by the chilly mist was a special kind of pleasure. They spent some time in comfortable silence. Sonny was tired of having the same conversations over and over again, and Nephi seemed to be keeping her questions back. He let out a satisfied sigh. "This is great, what is it?" He pointed to one of the bowls, causing Nephi's to glance at him. She lingered for a moment. "Just a simple fruit salad. Sorry, I didn't have time to make anything fancy. Plus, the supplies we received in Fallen Grace are not very varied." Sonny tilted his head a little. "Are desserts also included in the Legacy Nutrition course? How strange." She coughed, then looked away and remained silent for a while. Then, Nephi suddenly stood up and said, I'll go brew more tea." With that, she disappeared, leaving him alone. Sonny stared into the mist, then lowered his gaze and looked at his hand. Soon, a black flame appeared above it. A few seconds after it did, his skin started to blister. And a few moments after that, Sonny winced and dismissed the flame. His slightly burned skin shone with dark radiance and slowly healed itself. Then, he summoned the flame again. His hand was burned once more. Sonny repeated the process several times. Each time, he couldn't keep going for more than a dozen seconds before dismissing the fire. Even if he consciously willed himself to endure, his instincts took over. "I wonder if I can get used to this." His expression turned somber. "I'm back." Nephi sat down, carrying a new pot of tea. Noticing the black flame on his palm, she froze for a second. "What is that?" Sonny made the fire disappear and smiled faintly. "I used the mirror of truth to copy your dormant ability. That is how I healed Jet on the way back." She contemplated for a few moments, then nodded. "Good decision." Looking at her with a complicated expression, Sonny sighed. "But I don't have your lineage attribute, so the fire burns me. It hurts like hell. I don't know how you do it." Sonny was almost constantly using his aspect. Even when there was no active threat, his shadows were always out and about, either serving as his eyes or augmenting his body. Many routine tasks were solved with shadow step and shadow manifestation. Nephi's, on the contrary, used her aspect as rarely as possible. She did not even summon its powers in most battles, relying solely on her training and skill. It was only when the enemy was overwhelmingly dangerous that she resorted to using the soul flame. But even then, it seemed like too much. The pain of her flaw was unbearable. She shook her head. "Says the man who has been killed terribly many times already, but has no intention of slowing down. Dying over and over again, reliving the same day. I don't know what I would have done in your situation." Sonny smiled. "You say that, but come on. We both know that you would have seen it as a wonderful opportunity to fit more sword practice in your schedule." The corner of Neff's mouth curled upward. "Maybe I would." She remained silent for a while, looking into the fog. then said with a hint of wonder in her voice, "But then again, it would be strange and tempting to know that no matter what I do, there would be no consequences tomorrow. Maybe I would have done some things that I never dared to do before." Sunny stared at her in confusion, then frowned. "Hey, if you are going to insinuate that I'm a pervert again, let me tell you that I'm absolutely innocent. I've not done anything inappropriate in any of these revolutions, nor am I planning to." He gave her an indignant glance, then suddenly grinned and added in a more subtle tone, "Unless you want me to." Nephi's chuckled and looked away. After a while she said, "I wasn't insinuating anything, but it is interesting where your mind immediately went, revealing even." Sunny laughed. His day off was going better than he had expected. He was enjoying it quite a bit. Sunny and Nephi shared the desserts and enjoyed the tea. Their conversation flowed easily. Time passed slowly, but eventually she rose and went to check on Jet and Cassie. Soon, the sound of her light steps faded away and Sunny was left alone. He leaned on the trunk of the sacred tree, looking into the fog. His heart felt warm and at peace. But at the same time, Sunny could not throw what Neff had said out of his head. Do something that I never dared to do before. There were a few things he could think of. He sighed and stared into the distance. Sunny had complicated relationships with his closest companions, to say the least. Nephi's, Cassie, and he, there was a mess of emotions trapped between the three of them. Most of the things they wanted to say to each other had been left unspoken for a long time, especially between Sunny and Nephi's. He hesitated. At this point, he would have to be a complete fool to remain blind to how he felt. Sunny shifted uncomfortably and lowered his gaze. His heart suddenly felt stifled. He grimaced, then brushed his hand across the wooden deck. "Just say it, can't you even say it?" If he couldn't even say it now, then when would he? Wasn't he supposed to be the most honest person in two worlds? So why couldn't he even be honest with himself? Sunny remained motionless for a while, then let out a heavy sigh. "I care about Nephi's." No, that was not it. That was just being coy. He grimaced and looked up at the swaying branches of the sacred tree. Sunny remained motionless for a while. Then he took a deep breath and thought, "I love Nephi's." His expression collapsed. It was true. It had been for a long time. Sunny was not the most emotionally intelligent person, or at least he had not been before. If anything, his emotional development had been stunted, first by the rough life in the outskirts, then by the ruthless reality of the nightmare spell. Who had time to think about emotions when every day was a lethal battle for survival? So it had taken him a long time to recognize the truth of how he felt for Nephi's ever since the Forgotten Shore. In truth, he had already been in love with her before they reached the Dark City, hopelessly so, perhaps. And those feelings had not grown any weaker despite their many bitter disagreements. In fact, they were the reason why Sunny was so often infuriated with Nephi's. If he felt nothing for her, he would not have cared either way. His feelings had not faded or disappeared despite the long period of separation either. If anything, they only grew more intense, almost becoming an obsession. To be stronger than her, to be equal to her, to be free of her. That was what he had claimed, but it was a lie. The indescribable relief, joy, and completeness he had felt when she returned to the waking world. The maddening fury he had felt when she unanimously decided to join Valor. The deathly terror he had felt when the skinwalker snapped her neck. By now, there was no denying it. Whether through fate or coincidence, for better or worse, Nephi's was his person. The only one there was and would be for him. More than that, Sunny was not blind. Even though neither of them had ever dared to say it aloud, he knew that she felt the same way. It wasn't that hard to see. However, there was a reason why both of them kept quiet, Too many reasons, really. He lowered his head and closed his eyes for a moment. It was not because both of them did not really know how to handle their feelings and were shy about such things. Emotions were terribly messy, and that was just on their own. But when there were other obstacles involved, Sunny and Nephi's had different goals, and most of those goals were directly opposed to each other. Her pursuit of revenge against the spell left no space for something as frivolous as affection, or at least, in her heart, affection would always have to take the backseat. As for him, he had his reasons to stay silent as well. But maybe here in the loop, he didn't have to. How sweet. Sunny flinched and opened his eyes. The hateful sword wraith was standing in the mist, staring at him coldly. "Ah, young love, well, you aren't wrong. I've been forced to watch you two circling each other fearfully for so long that it makes me sick to simply remember. At least you idiot finally admitted it. My, oh my, all it took was dying dozens of times." Sunny looked away. "Shut up." There was no energy in his voice. The Sin of Solace grinned. "So what are you going to do now? Gather your courage and confess." Sunny threw a sharp gaze at him. "So what if I do?" The apparition laughed. Well, I wish you luck. Oh, there's just one problem. She's going to forget everything, isn't she? How cowardly of you. Seems rather unfair to the poor girl." Sunny gritted his teeth. The bastard was right. As much as he hated to admit it, the wraith was telling the truth. He hesitated, then spat. "Then I'll do it after we escape the loop. Why, you think I won't?" The Sin of Solace stared at him for a while, then sighed. Shaking his head, the sword wraith crouched and looked him in the eyes. "Aren't you forgetting something else, though?" Sunny frowned, unwilling to answer. However, the apparition did it in his stead. "You're her slave, Sunless. She owns you. What kind of relationship do you think is possible between the two of you as long as your bonds remain?" Sunny's expression grew ugly. Angered, he looked away and uttered through gritted teeth, "She would never use it." The Sin of Solace smiled. "Oh, won't she? How do you know? If there's one thing that this nightmare proves, it's that no one knows what the future holds. I mean, all your precious friends are right here, changed into corrupted monsters, going around slaughtering people. Even you are no different. Have you ever expected that Jet would brutally murder you one day? Or that Effie would satiate her hunger with your flesh? Funny that you are expecting Nephi's to never abuse her power over you in the same way." The wraith leaned closer. "After all, she already did." Sunny's mouth twitched. "That was to save my life, and she swore to never do it again." The apparition laughed. "But she already broke that oath." Sunny frowned, staring at him angrily. "What are you talking about? That time when she begged me not to die, that hardly constitutes a command." The Sin of Solace was smiling. No, it was that time the drowned attacked the chain breaker. What did she say back then? 'Go, I'll handle things here.' And then you instantly went into the water to fight the Leviathan." Sunny looked at him in confusion. "What? I was going to anyway." But the apparition's smile only widened. "Were you?" The mist was swirling around them, cold and suffocating. Sunny tried to remember how their first battle with the drowned had gone, exactly, and scowled. "Yes, I was. Even if I wasn't, it was just a slip of the tongue." The sword wraith looked at him disdainfully. "A slip of the tongue? Certainly, if you say so. Yet, can you imagine having a relationship with someone who can rob you of your free will with a simple slip of the tongue? How do you imagine such a relationship working? What kind of perverse partnership would it be? Are you really willing to be at her mercy always and absolutely?" The Sin of Solace laughed. "Gods, you are so odious, so loathsome, so pathetic. Tell me, is there a more pathetic thing than a slave who begins to trust his slaver?" Sunny stared at him silently, not knowing what to answer. Eventually, the apparition chuckled, shook his head, then stood up and walked away. His dark figure disappeared into the mist as if it had never been here. "If you are, go and surrender." Sonny lowered his head. A dark storm was raging in his mind. Curse it, curse my flaw and curse the shadow bond. I wish it had never existed. The cold mist swirled around his face, hiding it. The world was silent. Sonny remained under the sacred tree for a while, staring silently into the mist. The cold wind blew from beyond the island, bringing with it an insidious chill. The silence was only broken by the muffled rustling of leaves. His thoughts were dark. He did not know how much time had passed exactly when something seemed to change about the world. Sonny let out a quiet sigh and rose to his feet, hugging himself to preserve what little warmth remained from escaping into the fog. Looking down, he lingered for a few moments and then said somberly, "So you are finally here." At first, there was no response. Then the fog moved slightly, revealing a vague silhouette that had been hidden by its flowing veil. A wraith made of mist was standing on the deck of the chain breaker, mere meters away. Her inhumanly cold blue eyes were gazing at him with no emotion. Sonny smiled darkly. No wonder it took me a whole week to catch up on sleep. Every time Sonny slept, he would come to his senses at the start of the loop. There were two possible explanations for why he did. Either Sonny was sleeping for too long, or something killed him while he slept. He had assumed that it was the former, but now he knew that it was the latter. His hands trembled and turned into fists. Of course, why else? For dozens of revolutions, Sonny had been telling his companions to hide inside the chain breaker and wait while he risked his life exploring the island. But who said that the ship was safe? Sonny had never seen undying slaughter find it. But today was also the first time he had remained on the chain breaker for more than a couple of hours, awake. Curse you. A deep darkness shrouded his eyes. It meant that every time Sonny had left, thinking that his companions would be safe, the mist wraith discovered them. And killed them. Cassie and Jet had been killed terribly, over and over again, while he was gallivanting around the island. Nephi's had been killed too. Or had she been? Would he have felt if his master was no more? Would the spell have announced her passing? If Sonny had checked his runes, would he have seen her name grow dim and disappear? Staring at undying slaughter, Sonny gritted his teeth. "I'll destroy you." As a bitter smile appeared on his lips, he took a step forward and added calmly, "One day." The mist wraith moved. Not long after that, Sonny died. Sonny was crouching on the deck of the chain breaker once again. Straightening, he looked into the fog. His face remained motionless. After a while, a sigh escaped from his lips. "Well, I guess my break is over." He turned his head and silently watched as Nephi's and Cassie discussed the guiding light. They had forgotten the events of the previous revolution, the conversations they had with him, the laughter they shared. Everything was now erased, and his companions did not even know that they had lost something. But he knew. On this damned island, only two beings remembered everything: Sonny and the sin of solace, the wraith conjured from his own mind by the echo of Ariel's whisper. Looking down, Sonny pressed down on the wooden railing hard enough to hear it crack, then took a step back. This time he did not mount Nightmare immediately. Instead, Sonny concentrated and summoned the runes. Something about his posture must have attracted the attention of his companions, because they both suddenly grew silent. A moment later, Nephi's asked, "Sonny, what is it?" His gaze fell at the bottom of the field of runes. He remained silent for a bit, then answered calmly, "I am going to try something. I'm not sure what will happen exactly, so stay calm." With that, Sonny took a deep breath and called upon the fragment of Shadow Realm. It was strange, the fragment was not a memory, and neither was it an echo or a shadow. As such, he did not really know how to make it manifest. A mere ascended tyrant's essence was surely insufficient to summon a piece of a god's domain into existence. And yet somehow, Sonny knew exactly what to do. That knowledge was buried deep in his soul, as if he had always known. In the next moment, the world around them suddenly grew dimmer. Then dimmer, dimmer, and dimmer still. A strong gale rose, making Sonny's black mantle flutter. It was as though his figure was devouring all light, replacing it with an endless shadow. His eyes widened. Behind Sonny, Cassie shuddered. What? It was as though a tide of darkness flooded the world, rolling outward from the chain breaker. The sacred tree instantly disappeared from view, drowned in it, as did the figure of Saint at the bow of the ship. The dark cliffs could not be seen a moment later. The darkness did not stop there. Even though Nephi's and Cassie could not perceive it, Sonny could, somehow. He felt the entire island being swallowed by the shadow he had unleashed, with all light becoming extinguished in an instant. Soon it was as though they were standing in a lightless black void. Only Sonny could see that the world had not really disappeared. It was still there. The sacred tree still swayed subtly in the wind, and Saint was still standing at the bow. The dark cliffs were where they had been a few moments ago. The mist still swirled and flowed, only now it was like a liquid darkness. And he could feel. So that's what it is. The fragment of the shadow realm was, unsurprisingly, a shadow. A shadow so vast and ancient that his mind failed to comprehend its scale, so deep and unfathomable that his heart trembled in front of it. More than that, if Sonny wasn't mistaken, this inconceivable shadow was of the divine rank. It was lightless and black, but shone with the golden light of divinity in his vision at the same time. It was not alive, but it wasn't empty like the shadows of inanimate objects either. It did not belong to Sonny, and yet he was connected to it somehow. Even though Sonny had summoned it, he was, perhaps, not qualified yet to be its master. As Sonny stood frozen in the world of darkness, Nephi summoned a memory lantern and raised it, illuminating the deck of the chain breaker. A small island of warm light appeared around them. However, it was not nearly as wide as it should have been, as if the lantern was struggling to push back the unfathomable shadow. Its light trembled pitifully. "Sonny, what did you do?" He lingered with the answer, then said honestly, "I summoned a fragment of Shadow God's domain. You must have seen it in my runes. It's a legacy relic I received." The fragment had already swallowed all of Windflower. Sonny could feel it, which was strange. As an ascended tyrant, he could control his shadows from around 20 kilometers away. However, the range of his shadow sense was much more modest, less even than that of his vision. How was it that he could vaguely sense the far side of the island? Sonny hesitated for a few moments, then carefully extended his shadow sense. However, he did not extend it outward. Instead, he extended it into the fragment. In the next moment, Sonny yelped, staggered, and fell. "Ah, hell!" Before he landed on the hard wood, Nephi's caught him. Suddenly, her concerned face was very close. "Are you all right?" He retracted his shadow sense and stared at her for a few strangely awkward moments. Then, Sonny coughed and nodded. There was a salty taste of blood on his tongue. "Yes, I just overdid it a little." Supported by her, he rose to his feet and grimaced. "This domain fragment, I'm not sure what else it can do, but it definitely enhances the range of my shadow sense. To a degree where I can perceive everywhere on the island at the same time, well, except for the tower. It seems to be shielded from view somehow. Needless to say, that's not something that a human brain, even that of a master, is wired to handle." The sensory overload he had been blasted with was not something he wanted to experience again. Even though it was only like a minuscule fraction of the indescribable horror of using "Where is my eye?" The strain was still too much for Sonny. And that was not even counting what he would perceive. There were all kinds of great and terrible creatures on Windflower, and witnessing some of them was dangerous in and of itself. Not to mention that more than one of these beings were capable of staring back at him. That said, Sonny was almost certain that he could be more precise with spreading his senses through the fragment. He reassured Nephi's and Cassie that everything was all right, and made another attempt. A moment later, his stifled scream traveled through the mist. In the end, it took Sonny some time, and a lot of cursing, to teach himself how to limit the scope of his shadow sense to a comparatively narrow area. The boon of this situation was that he could concentrate on any location on the island, meaning that he could observe all of it at will. He could also feel something else. As long as he remained in the unfathomable depths of the fragment, his aspect seemed to be enhanced. It was as if the ancient shadow was nourishing it. Sonny was not sure yet what this enhancement meant, but it had to be useful. As soon as he grew confident in not collapsing after extending his shadow sense into the dark distance, Sonny concentrated and searched for Jet. Soon, he felt her moving through the forest. Drops of blood fell into the moss, and a murderous wraith was pursuing her. How convenient! Jumping into the saddle, Sonny warned Nephi's and Cassie to stay on the chain breaker and sent his steed into the mist. The next hour went somewhat differently from how it usually was. The descent of the Shadow Realm fragment affected his companions enough so that their familiar reactions and thoughts changed, but overall, it was all the same. Sonny rescued Jet, healed her with the help of the Mirror of Truth, and returned to the chain breaker. Then, he explained the nature of the loop to the members of the cohort. After that, however, Sonny had to make new decisions. Now that he knew that leaving his companions on the chain breaker was tantamount to leaving them for dead, there was no other choice but to venture into the mist together, which was a moot point, really, considering that he had already decided to rely on teamwork more before his break. His goal of compiling a time map of Windflower had become much easier, as well, due to how far his shadow sense could reach in the boundary of the fragment. Perhaps the best thing about the fragment of Shadow's domain was that it existed independently of Sonny. It was not manifested from his essence, and did not consume it to exist. On the flip side, it was also not under his control. Although Sonny could benefit from being within a piece of Shadow God's domain, he had not magically become akin to a sovereign. There was an unexpected but welcome side effect to his innate connection to the inconceivable shadow, though. It was that the rudimentary affinity to water that the crown of twilight granted him could spread through the fragment, as well. And since mist was made of water, Sonny found himself capable of influencing the fog. He could make it thicker, or push it away from a certain area. It was hard to say how beneficial, exactly, such an ability would be, but Sonny felt that he would find a way to use it to his advantage. Other than that, the most obvious advantage of the fragment was that Sonny could manifest it into tangible objects. Even though these objects were manifested with ascended essence, their origin was still a divine shadow. As such, they were much more powerful and robust than what he had been able to conjure up previously. Of course, using them burned a tremendously larger amount of essence in proportion. The last thing Sonny experimented with was dismissing the fragment of the Shadow Realm. Sadly, it seemed impossible. Just as he had expected, once unleashed, the fragment couldn't be taken back. Or at least he had no authority to do so. The only exception was the Shadow Lantern. Sonny discovered that he could hide the fragment inside the divine memory, but strangely enough, he couldn't summon it back from it. Once the inconceivable shadow entered the gate of the Black Lantern, it was as though it disappeared forever. He was somewhat disheartened, but at the same elated. Armed with the fragment and the Mirror of Truth, and supported by the members of the cohort, suddenly, Sunny felt that creating a moving map of Windflower was not as impossible of a task anymore. Without wasting any time, he got to work. He was going to find a way to escape this endless hell and take his companions with him. Over the next few revolutions, Sunny repeated the same actions. He would summon the fragment of Shadow Realm, rescue Jet, enter the cave system below the island with the cohort, and slay the Cavern Terror. Then they would proceed to the far side of the island, find Effie, and hide from danger until the end of the loop. Each time, the time it took to reach the northern edge of Windflower grew shorter, but it was still not nearly short enough. So Sunny continued to study the island and perfect his time map. He kept the cohort safe, or at least tried to, and explored Windflower through shadow sense. He progressed swiftly due to how drastically the fragment extended its reach. Sunny already knew which places on the island were too dangerous to observe, so he managed to avoid drawing the attention of the beings who dwelled there. Apart from those horrors, the rest of the creatures imprisoned on Windflower were now like an open book to him. Or rather, somewhat like an open book. Although he could perceive the movement of their shadows, that unique sense of his was not a true replacement for sight, nor could it replace the experience of actually facing the abominations. Luckily, Sunny had already done so in the previous revolutions. Combined with his already existing experience, Shadow Sense was enough to help him compile a map. He experimented with the Mirror of Truth as well, to a varying degree of success. The second aspect ability Sunny tried to copy was Cassie's premonition. He judged that sensing a few seconds into the future would make him nearly invincible. However, Sunny was left disappointed. He seemed to possess the right affinity to use her ability with a high level of efficiency, but it was simply too strange. He had long been accustomed to perceiving the world from different points of view simultaneously. That was how he was able to scout through his shadows, after all. His mental ability was further increased by the Shroud of Dusk. However, suddenly perceiving two distinct, but moving and overlapping threads of time was just too much. The first time Sunny activated the premonition ability, he instantly got disoriented and fell to the ground. Simply trying to take a step was enough to paralyze him. Dazed and lost, he stumbled around blindly for a while, then deactivated the enchantment of the Mirror of Truth and watched it crumble into pieces. His head was spinning. Perhaps Sunny could adapt to Cassie's strange way of perceiving the world, but it was not going to be a short process. His time was better spent exploring other opportunities. Neff's ability to control fire, on the other hand, was easy enough to master. Sadly, it was not very useful without her affinities and her soul flame. The same could be said about Cassie's ability to perceive the world through someone else. Then there was Jet. Sunny had high hopes for her ascended ability, not because it allowed her to absorb fragments of shattered soul cores and improve her own, but because it removed the limit of how much her body could be enhanced by essence. Sunny had an enormous reserve of essence, as far as masters were concerned. So, he thought that he could make himself as powerful as a saint with the help of this ability. Outrageously, his first attempt ended in one of the most gruesome deaths he had experienced in the loop. As it turned out, the ability to oversaturate her flesh with essence worked for Jet only because of her unique constitution, not quite dead, but also not alive. When Sunny tried doing the same, he was quite literally torn apart from the inside. He did not make the second attempt. Her dormant ability could allow him to absorb the essence of the enemies he killed, a useful tool, but not useful enough to sacrifice the Mirror of Truth for, at least not in their current situation. Her awakened ability, though, was extremely powerful, being able to strike the souls of his enemies directly. It was hard to describe how much more deadly of a creature it made Sunny. Effie's physical augmentation wasn't bad either. However, there was one ability that outshone them all. It was Cassie's dormant ability. That ability allowed her to learn a lot about the aspects and attributes of Awakened, as well as the attributes and unholy powers of nightmare creatures. Cassie had to be close to receive that information, but Sonny could rely on his shadows to serve as his eyes. He could even gain some knowledge purely through shadow sense. That allowed him to study the prisoners of Windflower infinitely faster than he had ever expected. Slowly but surely, his knowledge of Windflower grew. Armed with that knowledge, the cohort managed to kill the rotting leopard. They clashed and triumphed over the giant octopus-like abomination as well. They even learned how to destroy the swarm of black millipedes. The time map he had been trying to create was becoming more and more complete. There were empty spaces on it, of course. For example, Sonny had never managed to learn much about the tower. There were a few places on the island that were too lethal for him to explore as well. But he did not need to study them anyway, because his goal was not the exploration of Windflower. His goal was simply to get to Effie and return to the chain breaker in time, then escape this hell and never look back. Nevertheless, the closer his time map came to completion, the colder Sonny felt. It was because he was growing more and more wary of the truths he learned. The purpose of creating the map was to track the movements of the dangerous nightmare creatures across the island throughout the loop. He needed to know about them to create the most efficient path to the far side of the island and back, to rescue both Jet and Effie and leave Windflower in the span of a single day. However, once Sonny had most of the information he needed, he felt nothing but dread, realizing that that goal was utterly unattainable. Even the most efficient of the remotely safe routes was not fast enough to get him to where he needed to be. Even if he made Effie ride Nightmare, there was not enough time. With their current strength, and with the tools available to them, making a round trip across the island before the loop terminated seemed simply impossible. Sonny was on the deck of the chain breaker once again. He straightened and looked into the mist, his eyes sunken. "Doesn't work, that doesn't work. Should we abandon the cavern's route?" His bleak voice was quiet enough to not be heard by Nephi's and Cassie. Although Sonny had been careful not to overwork himself too much again, the strain of surviving and failing to survive on Windflower was slowly getting to him. It was hard to keep himself from succumbing to hopelessness and numbness. Sonny had known many bitter defeats, but being crushed over and over again still burdened him. More than that, his mindset was slowly deteriorating into not caring about whether he lived or died at all. Why would he care if all that waited after death was another revolution, and then another, and another, endlessly and without reprieve? If there was one thing that kept him grounded and served as an anchor for his sanity, it was the fact that watching his companions die was always an agony. Even knowing that they would be reborn in the loop did not ease the pain and desperation Sonny felt each time he miscalculated and led them to their deaths. If he was by himself, he probably would not have given up, but his focus and determination would have deteriorated much faster. He had to take the members of the cohort away from Windflower, though Jet, Cassie, Effie and her baby, Nephi's. That thought kept him motivated. He was the only one who could. Due to a random twist of fate, Sonny possessed a cursed sword which made him able to remember the previous revolutions. That alone placed him ahead of everyone else on the island, in fact. Simply knowing that they had to escape was already half of the victory. It was just that the other half had turned out to be insurmountable. And it was hard to carry all that burden all by himself. No, the cavern route is the safest, which makes it the fastest. Sonny remained silent for a few moments. It's simple. Since nothing works, I have to explore more possibilities, the mirror of truth. That is the answer. I should make it reflect more nightmare creatures. But not beasts and monsters and demons. Only devils and those above them will do. Sonny was motionless, going over the collection of horrors stored in his mind. There were not that many beings on wind flowers that both fit the criteria and could be caught in the reflection of the mirror of truth without getting him killed. The cavern terror was one of them, the creature hidden in the port, as well, although escaping from it alive was not easy. Of course, there were undying slaughter and devouring beasts as well, but they were even more deadly. Suddenly, a strange disharmony entered his thoughts. Sonny frowned and tried to discover its source. What was it? Why did he feel that something was wrong? It took him some time to realize that Cassie and Nephi's, who were supposed to be discussing the guiding light behind him, were strangely silent. Looking back, he saw that the blind girl had already used the sacred staff to determine where Effie was located. Nephi's was studying the vague shapes of the dark cliffs. His frown deepened. It changed why. Sonny was sure that they had not heard him muttering to himself. Had he done something else to affect the usual flow of events, or failed to do something to keep it stable? I don't think I did, though. Sonny rubbed his face. Perhaps his posture or presence influenced Cassie and Nephi's without him noticing. Sonny. He shook off his confusion and looked at Nephi's. Yeah, I'm fine. Actually, there's something I need to do. Stay calm. I'll summon the fragment of shadow domain in a moment. The world was devoured by the primordial shadow once again. Sonny mounted Nightmare and left the chain breaker once again. He found Jet and brought her back once again. This time, he did not use the mirror of truth to copy Soul Flame and heal her right away, though. Although it was a little cruel to Jet, Sonny could not allow himself to waste the miraculous memory that way. Her wounds would be healed by Nephi's in a couple of hours, regardless. Everything went as usual, however. When he returned to the chain breaker, the strangeness continued. The conversation seemed to be the same, but something felt out of place. It was only when they reached the bone orchard and started rending the hollow butterfly that he finally figured out what was wrong. Jet and Nephi's were resting, while he and Cassie were busy splitting the tough chitin on the great monster. And the blind girl seemed strangely distracted, moving slower than she was supposed to. Right, it all started when she failed to make her usual remarks about the guiding light. He had only noticed that Cassie was behaving strangely that late because she usually kept quiet while the others talked. Her subtle reactions, however, had been different from the familiar ones all along. What is going on? Sonny stopped what he was doing and stared at Cassie with a slight frown. Eventually, he asked, Cassie, is everything all right with you? She froze, then turned to face him and lingered for a few moments. Yes, I think so. I just have this strange feeling. He raised his eyebrow. What feeling? It was an ominous sign that their oracle was having a strange feeling. Cassie's premonitions were never trivial and were usually the harbingers of terrifying events. But what could have triggered this premonition? Nothing was supposed to change on Windflower unless Sonny was the one to change it. He waited tensely to hear her response, all kinds of dreadful theories flashing in his mind. However, when Cassie finally answered, all those thoughts disappeared, replaced by stunned silence. She shrugged. It's nothing serious. I just can't get rid of this feeling of déjà vu. Sonny stared at without saying anything. Déjà vu. Wasn't that how he himself had first come to recognize the twisted nature of time on Windflower? He blinked. Was Cassie becoming aware of the loop, too? Throughout the rest of the loop, Cassie continued to be a little off. The changes were subtle, but Sonny could easily spot them. After all, he had been going through these tribulations for a long time now. Anything that was different from how things were supposed to go drew his attention. Cassie was clearly in a slightly dazed state, not unlike how he had been the first time around. Otherwise, she would have realized that having a persistent sense of déjà vu on an island where time endlessly repeated itself had to mean something. Then again, she might have simply attributed it to the time loop and moved on. It was only Sunny who knew that the blind girl was acting differently from how she had in the previous revolutions. Why is this happening? Cassie was distracted because of her strange mental state, while Sunny was distracted because of Cassie. The cohort had slain the cavern terror, traversed the system of caves, and obliterated the swarm of black millipedes. Finally, they climbed out of the chasm and ventured into the misty forest. Now that it was submerged in darkness, Sunny found it much easier to move forward. He was in his element. He could also track the movements of the nightmare creatures populating this part of the island, not to mention the fact that he already knew what they were capable of. Some abominations had to be avoided at all costs, some could be challenged. It was easier to avoid the former and not as hard to slay the latter. Armed with knowledge and the element of surprise, the cohort made swift progress. Eventually, there came a moment when Sunny told everyone to slow down and took the lead. Banishing the mist from a small area in front of them, he called, "Effie, do not." As soon as he spoke, a gray spear flashed toward him with tremendous speed, as if shot from a devastating siege engine. Holding back a sigh, Sunny moved to the side and effortlessly caught the spear with his bare hand. The power of Effie's throw was scary enough to drag him back a few steps, but he easily kept his balance. "Throw that damned spear at me." Nephi's and Jet had barely had any time to react. They both stared at the deadly weapon held in his hand with astonishment. Cassie, though, did not seem too surprised. Her soft lips moved as if she was whispering something to herself. Effie's figure was already revealed, standing in the darkness. "D doofus," Sunny scoffed. "Who else would it be? Come, take your spear back, it's heavy." The rest of the revolution went without anything dire happening. Sunny was in no mood to try anything dangerous. Anyway, he was busy recalculating various possibilities, coming up with new solutions and observing Cassie. From time to time, he also looked at Effie. The boisterous huntress had been put off a little at the start, noticing that he was not reacting to her teasing. But after Jet explained the nature of the loop to her, she understood why Sunny seemed different from his usual self. Tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, Effie looked at him bashfully. "Ah, so you've heard all these jokes already, dozens of times. Ugh, crap, I didn't think I was that predictable." Luckily, Nephi's was there to be flustered in his place. Watching the huntress explain what had happened to her, Sunny couldn't help but think about Effie. It was an incredibly stupid thing, what she had done. Getting pregnant in the middle of a war was not exactly smart. Even if it had not been intentional, the result was the same. Still, he could understand somewhat. Passions were high on the battlefield, and even the smartest people were prone to making mistakes when they were not thinking straight. Gods knew he had made his own share of stupid decisions. Plus, modern medicine was often unreliable when it came to awakened, especially the more powerful ones. Sunny did not know if Effie had taken steps to prevent this exact situation from happening, but even if she had, they might have ended up failing her. Even if that was not the case, he could understand. But how the hell had she ended up being pregnant in a nightmare? Bad luck, really. An avalanche of misfortune that started with a single pebble. A heavy sigh escaped from his lips. Indeed, Effie had never had any intentions of challenging the third nightmare. She was only here because of a series of tragic events that no one could have foreseen. It had to have started not long after she found out about her condition. Back then, the government forces escorting Wake of Ruin were never meant to participate in a large-scale battle. They were simply there as observers. And yet, when the great gates opened during the Battle of the Black Skull, Effie had no choice but to escape into the dream realm, just like the rest of the masters and saints there. In the Nightmare Desert, Beastmaster offered her a way out, but the members of the cohort had no plans of challenging a seed then. Their goal was to reach the Black Pyramid. Effie must have thought that they would either escape or die in a matter of days or weeks at most. Her pregnancy was not supposed to become an issue. Unlike the rest of them, Effie had already lost one cohort. Her original companions had all perished in the catacombs below the Dark City. The thought of becoming the lone survivor once again must have been unbearable. So she chose to remain with her friends. It was only after Beastmaster, Sation, Morgan, and Sir Gilead left that a decision to follow Mordred into a nightmare was made. At that point, the only choice Effie had was to challenge the Seed with them, or remain in the desert alone to not become a burden to her companions. But even if she had chosen the latter, the members of the cohort would have definitely not allowed her to commit suicide out of misguided consideration for their well-being. And here they were. Sunny looked away and sighed again. It must have been hard on her. Effie always put up a carefree front, but he knew that behind it, she had known just as much heartbreak and sorrow as the rest of them, if not more. Making the decisions she had made, no matter right or wrong, could not have been easy. In fact, it was the opposite. Every step of the way must have been frightening, heavy, and difficult. I have to get her out of this hellhole alive. They would deal with the rest later. Eventually, the revolution came to an end. And when the next one started, Sunny was startled by an unexpected noise. Looking back, he saw that Cassie had dropped the guiding light, which clattered and rolled across the deck. Her expression was frozen. Taking a step toward the blind girl, Sunny lingered for a moment and asked, "What's the matter?" Cassie slowly turned to face him and took a shallow breath. Her words were exactly what he expected to hear. "Sunny, I remember." Sunny did not know how many revolutions it had taken him to become aware of the loop. However, he knew that around 2 months had passed since he did. That was how much longer it had taken for Cassie to join him in knowing the truth. Standing on the deck of the chain breaker, Sunny stared at the blind girl intensely. He was feeling a strange mix of emotions, relief and gratitude, to start with. He was incredibly elated at the thought of sharing the burden of escaping Windflower with someone, especially someone as resourceful and steady as Cassie. But at the same time, there was a note of unease in his heart. How exactly had she come to know about the loop, and why? For him, it was because of the sin of Solace. Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then suddenly took a step forward and asked, his voice grim, "You see him too, don't you? Admit it, I know you do." The blind girl tilted her head a little, an expression of confusion appearing on her face. "See who? I don't understand." Sunny hesitated for a moment. Was she telling the truth, or was she only pretending to be oblivious to the sin of Solace? If it was the latter, he had to give Cassie and her acting skills credit. She would be a much better liar than he had ever suspected her to be, if that was the truth. But why would she hide it? To spare them both the embarrassment, perhaps. Gods knew. Sunny would not want anyone to hear the things his inner demon whispered into his ears every day. If so, it would make sense how Cassie had learned about the loop, and why it had taken her longer to become aware of it. She could only perceive the sin of Solace by using her ascended ability on Sunny, after all, and would thus be far less susceptible to the Wraith's influence. However, it was not necessarily the case that she could see and hear the hateful apparition. In fact, it was far more likely that Cassie was telling the truth. The sin of Solace only existed in Sunny's mind, and was therefore unlikely to be seen by her while sharing his senses. She could have simply become aware of the loop because of her unrivaled affinity to fate and revelations. The blind girl had always been able to feel and perceive things that none of them could. It was not outside the realm of possibility that she would slowly learn to sense the twisted nature of time on Windflower by herself. Cassie could have been sincerely confused by his question. Sunny simply did not know. He frowned a little. The sin of Solace, The sword wraith that follows me around, you can't see him." Cassie looked at him silently for a few moments, then smiled faintly. "How can I see him? I'm blind." She pointed to her beautiful blue eyes, making Sunny cough in embarrassment. "No, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, forget it." Did it really matter if Cassie could perceive the sin of solace or not? Sunny would prefer it if she couldn't, but if she could and was willing to pretend otherwise, that was fine as well. It was not like Cassie had not been pretending to not know various things ever since becoming an awakened. Her aspect and abilities not only allowed her to learn secrets, but also gave her no choice but to learn them. To spare herself and the people to whom those secrets belonged a lot of embarrassment, she probably kept quiet about such things. At least that was what Sunny thought. He grimaced, remained silent for a while, and then smiled tentatively. "Well, anyway, you really remember. That is great news." Indeed it was. At first, Sunny had only considered his mental state and how sharing the burden with another person would alleviate his fatigue and loneliness. But really, the benefit was so much greater than that. With two members of the cohort being able to carry the knowledge of the previous revolutions into the future ones, the range of things they could achieve would double. Everything that Sunny had been doing alone would be done faster, and solutions he had not dared to try would not be nearly as daunting anymore. More than that, Sunny and Cassie did not need to pursue all these goals together. They could split up and tackle different tasks simultaneously, thus accelerating the entire escape to a great degree. Of course, he needed to consider his plans carefully. There were things that Cassie could potentially achieve on her own, and things that she would never be able to do without his help. He would have to teach her everything he had come to know, as well. Even though the blind girl had become aware of the loop, the current revolution was only her second one. Sunny, however, had been accumulating knowledge of wind flower over more than 60 revolutions. She had to benefit from the groundwork he had laid before becoming a true ally to him in this timeless hell. Yes, I'll have to teach her about the island and the abominations populating it first. Cassie, meanwhile, turned to face the mist. The soft lines of her delicate face twisted slightly, expressing her doubts and anxiety. "Yes, I do remember, but it seems so odd, like a strange dream." She lowered her head. "That hollow butterfly, the caverns, the dark forest, and Effie, I can't believe that Effie is." It was at that moment that both Cassie and Sunny were suddenly interrupted. Looking at them in utter confusion, Nephi's raised an eyebrow. "What are you two talking about?" She frowned. What does Cassie remember, and why is remembering something so important? Caverns, forests, and butterflies. What does it mean? And what is it about Effie? The two of them turned to her, surprised. Sunny was suddenly very guilty about forgetting Neff in all the commotion. "So, I'll have to explain everything again, I guess." But then he suddenly had a thought. The questions were addressed at both of them, so his flaw was not compelling him to answer. Looking down, Sunny patted Cassie on the shoulder and smiled. "You take this one, Cass. I'll go rescue Jet." Before the blind girl could even answer, he already mounted Nightmare and disappeared into the mist. It was good to have an assistant. By the time Sunny returned with Jet, Cassie had already explained the situation to Nephi's as best as she could. That had already saved him some time, not that it mattered during this revolution. For now, his goal was to get Cassie up to speed. As they left the chain breaker and headed toward the bone orchard, Sunny started to describe the perils of wind flower to her in detail. Jet and Nephi's listened, too, growing grimmer with each minute. "The devouring beast is here as well." Hearing Jet's somber question, Sunny nodded. She lingered for a moment. "Who is devouring beast, though?" "Oh." Soul Reaper only knew who Undying Slaughter was because they had met. She had no concept of who the 6 plagues were, and no explanation to how a defiled version of her could exist on the island. Sunny explained the things briefly, not that he knew much more than her. We don't know how they exist or why. These future versions of ourselves are known as the 6 heralds of the estuary of the 6 plagues, and 2 of them are here, on the island, the future version of you and the future version of Effie. He lingered for a moment before adding, "We also don't know how the 2 of them ended up here. My theory is that they were exiled to Windflower to contain their flaws, but it's just conjecture." Jet's face remained impassive. She nodded silently and did not say anything about his indirect castigation of her flaw. Who would like hearing that her personal curse was so terrible that even the nightmare creatures had chosen to banish her corrupted future self into isolation? Sunny let out a quiet sigh and continued explaining things to Cassie. The blind girl was listening to him attentively, seemingly not having trouble with digesting the incredible amount of information. From time to time, she asked him small but poignant questions. By the time they reached the bone orchard and found the hollow butterfly, Sunny had already shared the most important pieces of knowledge. Before they went about creating the pikes and the javelins, he drew a crude map of the island on the ground. "And Effie is here. For now, I have found no way to get to her and return to the chain breaker in time." Cassie, Nephi's, and Jet studied the map. After a few moments of silence, the blind girl asked, "Have you considered leaving the island with Jet and returning to the loop from the northern side?" Sunny hesitated for a while. Eventually, he shook his head and said in a grim tone, "I can't say that I didn't, but it is simply too dangerous. Do remember that it's only called north because that's how I drew the map. In reality, I have no idea which side of the island faces which direction. Navigating to Effie's side won't be easy, and it is not even a given that we'll be able to navigate at all while being thrashed by the whirlpool." His expression turned even darker. "I don't see us faring well in the vortex. Even if we fly above it, the winds would certainly throw us around. We might be able to get back to the island, but not to a landing zone of our choosing. We have gotten incredibly lucky the first time, actually. That beach where we landed is one of the few relatively safe places on Windflower. If we crashed almost anywhere else, we'd be dead in a matter of minutes. Even if the abominations dwelling in those places wouldn't have killed us, the thing that hides in the mist above the island would." Sunny sighed. "Most importantly, we simply don't know how entering the loop functions. Not only where, but also when we land is a question. We can only leave at the end of the day when the crown of twilight provides me with essence. But if we return to the same point in time, Effie will already be lost. In short, there are too many risks." Cassie contemplated for a short while, then nodded. "I see. Remaining on the island seems like the most promising choice then. But you have already explored all the routes and even learned a lot about most nightmare creatures here. Some of them, unbelievably, we have even defeated. So why do you say that there is no way to get Effie to the chain breaker in time?" Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then winced. "The problem is that this damned place is simply impossible to traverse for a bunch of ascended like us. Sure, we have killed a few of the local residents, but only the weakest and most vulnerable of them, or those that our powers directly counter. The rest are too dreadful for us to fight, so we can only advance by hiding and timing our movements perfectly. And that is too slow to get to the other side and come back in the span of a single day." The blind girl was studying the map. For a moment, Sunny was reminded of how strange the situation was. Cassie could not see, so she was simply pretending to look at the map. She seemed to have developed a habit of imitating the actions of those who had sight, in order to not make the people around her feel uncomfortable. While in reality, she was actually seeing the map through the eyes of her companions. He hesitated, then added with a bit of hope in his voice, "But that was back when I was the only one with the detailed knowledge of the loop. Now that there are two of us, the situation might change." Cassie did not answer for a while. Then she slowly shook her head. "No, it won't change." Sonny was taken aback. He stared at her tensely, then asked, his voice even. "And why is that?" The blind girl sighed. "It's because I am not strong enough to make a decisive difference. Sure, with my help, you can save an hour or two, but that is not enough. Even if we separate, the scope of the things I can accomplish is limited. If this island is too dangerous for you, Sonny, then it is certain death for me." She frowned. "Even if we somehow manage to make everyone in the cohort remember the previous revolutions, it will still not be enough. Not that having Nephi's jet and Effie slowly being driven mad by that cursed sword of yours is an option." Sonny's face darkened. He scoffed, then looked away. "So what are you suggesting we do, then?" Cassie shrugged. "We explore every opportunity. The things we've learned offer us no solution, so there is no other choice but to turn to things we've yet to explore and hope for the best. Starting with—" She leaned forward slightly and pointed to the map. Sonny lowered his gaze and looked at where her delicate finger was pointing. His expression changed subtly. "Of course it's that place." The place the blind girl was pointing at was at the very center of the map. There, a crude image of a tall tower was drawn, surrounded by a wide moat. There were several places on the island that Sonny had not dared to explore yet. They were too dangerous and lay off the route that led to Effie. He was already tormented enough by dying while trying to reach her, so losing his life meaninglessly to satiate his curiosity did not seem like a good idea. That said, Cassie was right. It was not as though Sonny had not considered grasping at straws by venturing into these dangerous territories before. He knew that he would most likely end up searching for a solution there eventually, but not before exhausting all other choices. Well, his choices had been exhausted. Cassie had become aware of the loop just when they had, so he allowed himself to grow hopeful for a few hours. However, she was now reminding him of the harsh reality. Even if there were two people who remembered the previous revolutions now, it was still not enough to solve the diabolical puzzle of Windflower. Even with everything he had learned, there was no feasible way to achieve their goals, which meant that they had to expand their efforts to the most dangerous corners of the hellish island. And the tower, it was the most dangerous of them all by far. Sonny had already tried to enter it once, during one of the earlier revolutions. However, before he could even cross the bridge, he had died without even realizing what had killed him. The bones of the dreadful nightmare creatures and the abomination standing motionlessly on the bridge only solidified the fact that the stronghold of the Seeker was absolutely deadly. More deadly than the overgrown port, the harrowing shrine, and the eerie circle of black obelisks. He stared at the map silently. "Can't say I'm not curious to get inside, though." Windflower was just too mysterious. Sonny had been exploring the dreadful island for about 2 months now, and although he was now familiar with its landscape and dangers, he did not know a lot about its history. Who was the Seeker that had lived here before exactly? How had that person been able to not only survive inside the loop, but also build the tower, the port, the shrine, and other structures within it? Or had the vortex not existed yet when they called Windflower home? If it had not, was the Seeker responsible for creating it? Sonny knew, of course, that Windflower had not always been trapped within a loop of repeating time. Otherwise, there was no explanation for the existence of the Bone Orchard, the steps cut into the cliffs, and many other landmarks of the nightmarish island. Even the line of footprints they had found in the white sand predated the starting point of the loop. They looked like they had been left only a few hours, but in reality, the person who had leapt off the edge of the island must have done so many centuries ago. Sonny wondered if those were the footprints of the mysterious Seeker. He also wondered if the loop was really created by someone, Can it be destroyed as well? If there was a place where he could find answers to at least some of these questions, it was the Seeker's Tower. Looking at its crudely drawn image and Cassie's finger pointing to it, Sonny let out a heavy sigh and nodded. All right, now that there is no other choice, we will explore the tower. The tower was just like it had been before, but also a little different. This time, Sonny and the members of the cohort, including Effie, approached it from the northern side. Windflower was also shrouded in impenetrable darkness, so the sight of the lonesome spire rising above the forest was even more foreboding. The light in one of its highest windows seemed even brighter now, shining above the dreadful island like a beacon. The Seeker's Tower was not exactly ominous in and of itself. It was not a gargantuan structure like the Crimson Spire or the great ivory pagoda of the Kingdom of Hope, nor was its architecture particularly menacing. In fact, it was rather beautiful. The gray tower was perched atop a tall black cliff, airy and austere. Nevertheless, it emanated a sense of absolute harrowing threat. Every time Sonny looked at it, he could feel a chill run down his spine. The frozen figures of terrifying nightmare creatures that stood on the bridge did not help one bit. Even now, he was staring at them with a dark expression. The members of the cohort were doing the same as they hid between the pines. Is that a great beast? In the sinister silence of the misty forest, Effie's whisper sounded as loud as thunder. Sonny glanced at her and nodded solemnly. Indeed it is. One of the abominations caught by the bridge was a towering monstrosity that seemed to be made entirely out of bulging muscles, sharp claws, and harrowing fangs. It was almost unnoticeable in the darkness of the fragment, but because the light shining from the window reflected from its pale hide, a vague silhouette could be seen. Effie gulped. Damn. That reaction did not surprise Sonny. After all, only a fool would not be scared by a great nightmare creature. I want to eat it so much. It's not fair that only you and Princess got to feast on a great abomination. That turtle's meat must have tasted heavenly, right? Sonny remained motionless for a few moments, then shook his head. Never mind. He wouldn't have deemed the gluttonous huntress with an answer, but sadly, his flaw compelled him to. Gritting his teeth, Sonny lingered for as long as he could, and then said reluctantly, Yeah, it tasted pretty amazing. In the darkness, Nephis carefully touched his shoulder. When Sonny turned to her, she asked in a low voice, What do we do now? He studied her beautiful face for a few moments and sighed. What was there to do? We will try to cross the bridge. Right, all of you, prepare to die. Although the Seeker's Tower was right in front of them, Sonny had little hope that they would be able to reach its entrance this time. Not only was the tower protected by the eerie enchantment, but the revolution was also close to its end. It had taken them a lot of time to find Effie and get back to the heart of the island. He did not know how much longer they had exactly, but it might have been mere minutes. In the end, they never found out. The black cliff was surrounded by a wide open space where there were no trees. Not long after the members of the cohort cautiously abandoned the forest, a gentle wind caressed Sonny's face, forcing him to look up. Windflower was shrouded in impenetrable darkness, so no one except for Sonny could see, but there was something there, above them, hiding in the black expanse of the misty sky. Frozen in terror, he watched dozens of twisting tendrils descending from the turbulent black fog, each hundreds of meters long. Then he was dead. Coming back to his senses on the deck of the chain breaker, Sonny could not help but shudder. This was the first time he had caught a glimpse of the being that dwelled in the mist above the island. Sonny had thought that Windflower had no horrors left to surprise him with, but he had been wrong. What even is that thing? Hiding how disturbed he was, Sonny turned and looked at Cassie. By now, he was if not accustomed, then at least familiar with the terrible trauma of dying. The blind girl had only recently become aware of the loop, though. For her, it must have been a harrowing experience. But contrary to his expectations, Cassie seemed perfectly fine, nonchalant, even. It was as though she had experienced countless deaths already. Sunny lingered for a moment. Right, considering her aspect, she probably has. Nevertheless, he walked over to her, hesitated for a moment, and tried to make his voice sound soft. "Are you all right?" A brief pale smile appeared on Cassie's face. She nodded. "Yes, I'm fine, it's just it was sobering." Nephi stared at them silently, a hint of confusion appearing in her tired gray eyes. She was once again suffering from the symptoms of essence exhaustion. Sunny sighed and gestured to Cassie, imploring her to take care of the explanations. A moment later, he was off to retrieve Jet. I am definitely not avoiding Neff. He could have sent Cassie, Nightmare, and one of his shadows into the mist and remain on the chain breaker with Nephi's instead. However, Sunny was not quite sure how to act around her now, after what the Sin of Solace had said, and what he himself had admitted, especially not if they were left alone. I'll just think about how to get into the terrifying ancient tower. That is much less daunting. He explained the situation to Jet on the way back to the chain breaker. At the same time, Cassie explained it to Nephi's. So, by the time the four of them reunited, everyone was already aware of what was going on. But the usual routine had to change from now on. If they wanted to enter the tower, they couldn't waste time going to the far side of the island and back. There was simply not enough hours in the loop, nevertheless. Sunny hesitated. How could he leave Effie alone in the cold mist and darkness? He was not sure what had happened to her in the previous revolutions without them, but knowing what he knew about the island, he doubted that it was something he would want to know. Sunny remained silent for a while, agonizing over the choice. Then Nephi suddenly spoke. Jet and I can handle that. He looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? She leaned over and pointed to the map he had drawn. You and Cassie can go to the tower. The two of us will enter the caverns, kill the terror, find Effie, and hide ourselves away until the end of the loop. Soul Reaper is the key to slaying that thing anyway, so we'll manage without you. Sunny listened to her with a grim expression and shook his head. But you know close to nothing about the island. The two of you alone won't be enough, especially with how low on essence you are. Nephi smiled. Who says that we'll be alone? We can take your Onyx Saint and Ravenous Fiend with us. You can also send one of your shadows to tag along. Once you unleash the Shadow Realm fragment, you'll be able to extend your senses to almost anywhere on the island, right? You can observe where we are and guide us with the help of the shadow. That will be enough. Sunny hesitated for a few moments. Neff's suggestion had merit. He was still not convinced that they would be able to survive the dread of Wind Flower on their own, but there was a chance, no matter how small. Sunny would most likely be able to guide them through the forest remotely. Cassie could share senses with either Nephi's or Jet 2 to warn him should anything unexpected happen. In any case, there was not much of a choice. Even though he did not like the idea of sending both members of the cohort who could not remember the past events of the loop blindly into the mist, it was worth trying at least once. Cassie and Sunny, meanwhile, had the best chance of actually making it inside the tower. Oh, I hate it. He shifted slightly, then nodded. Right, you two go and kill the cavern terror then. If you give it half of the beating you gave me, it might just run away and hide in fear. Both Nephi's and Jet stared at him incredulously. After a few moments of silence, Jet asked, When did we give you a beating? Nephi's nodded and raised an eyebrow. And why? Sunny coughed and looked away. Oh, don't worry about it. It was just a small misunderstanding. A couple revolutions ago, anyway, there's no time to waste. We should hurry if we don't want to be discovered by undying slaughter. Come on, let's move. Soon they left the chain breaker and separated. Accompanied by Saint and Fiend, Nephi's and Jet headed east toward the Bone Orchard. Sunny and Cassie, meanwhile, hurried north, toward the Seeker's Tower. Going straight to the tower might have saved Sunny and Cassie a lot of time, but it was also the most dangerous direction. Not only was undying slaughter prowling somewhere in the mist, but devouring beast was also not far away. There were other horrors waiting for them in the forest as well. Luckily, there might not have been a more elusive duo than Sunny and Cassie in Two Worlds. With the blind girl riding Nightmare, they could move swiftly in the darkness. Since she was sharing his senses, they did not need to carry a source of light with them, thus avoiding unnecessary attention. Sunny could detect most dangers far in advance, and Cassie's supernatural intuition warned them about those threats that could not be perceived that easily. Added to the extensive knowledge of the island, that allowed them to avoid confrontations with its prisoners and advance inland stealthily. Of course, it would not have been possible without the fragment of the Shadow Realm. The silent understanding they shared also played a large role. At some point, Cassie patted Nightmare on the shoulder. The black stallion slowed down and then halted, standing motionlessly in the flowing mist. Sunny leaned against the trunk of an ancient pine and listened to the muffled sounds of the forest, focused and calm. "Do you sense a threat?" Cassie nodded. "Something is approaching." He swiped the surrounding woods with shadow sense, but did not find anything. Nevertheless, the forest suddenly seemed more eerie than it had been before. Sunny frowned, contemplating which of the horrors of Misty Island could be lurking nearby. His expression dimmed. "Can we evade it?" The blind girl frowned, then hesitantly shook her head. "I don't think we can. There is not enough time." Sunny sighed and raised the sin of solace. "We fight, then." It was a shame. He really thought that they would be able to reach the Seeker's Tower alive. Before Sunny could prepare himself for the inevitable, and most likely fatal, clash. Cassie was suddenly surrounded by a whirlwind of sparks. Even the familiar motes of light seemed dimmer in the darkness of the fragment. The blind girl remained silent for a few moments, focusing on something, then said quietly, "We can't evade it, but we can try to lure it away." Soon, the blade mannequin Echo weaved itself from light and hurried into the mist, intentionally producing a lot of noise. Cassie pointed in a different direction. "Let's go." They rushed away, wanting to create as much distance between themselves and the unseen danger as possible. Sunny kept tracing the Echo with shadow sense. Less than a minute later, something strange happened to it. He still could not sense any movement in the shadows, but the blade mannequin suddenly halted. Its steel body convulsed and then slowly rose above the ground, thrashing wildly. One of its arms fell into the moss, shattered and torn. Then another. This one took a moment more to land. Soon, pieces of torn metal rained from somewhere very high above. Sunny could not sense the shadow of the clockwork swordsman anymore. It was simply gone. A few seconds later, Cassie sighed. The spell just announced that he is destroyed. Sunny was frowning as he ran. Fortunately, the poor Echo had bought them enough time to slip away from whatever it was that had gotten the blade mannequin. They could have taken a safer, but longer route. Perhaps he had been hasty in his decision to waste as little time as possible. Despite Sunny's doubts, they did reach the tower alive. Cassie had to sacrifice the Sybil Echo as well, but they made it to the heart of the island in one piece. Standing between the ancient pines at the edge of the killing field that surrounded the Black Cliff, the two of them remained silent for a while. Both were remembering the harrowing sight of the long tendrils descending from the mist to harvest their lives. That harvester, how do we avoid being noticed by it? Sunny had considered flying across the moat before, but now he did not dare to. The bridge seemed to be the only way, but even then, they would be in the open. Or we can swim. Sonny glanced at the rushing water and suddenly felt a chill running down his spine. Something told him that nothing could return from its depths alive. He contemplated for a few moments, then sighed. I can manipulate the mist to hide us from the harvester. We should be able to reach the bridge unseen. Cassie tilted her head a little. But can we cross the bridge? The figures of the frozen nightmare creature suggested otherwise. Sonny studied the dark silhouettes with a grim expression, then concentrated on the black cliff itself. There are runes carved into the rock. Do you recognize them? If there was indeed an enchantment protecting the tower, then Cassie was the only one who could decipher it. Sonny knew a bit of runic sorcery as well, but his knowledge of it was nowhere near that of the blind seer. She did not answer for a while, thinking. Eventually, Cassie frowned. It is hard to say. We can only see a part of the inscription from here. Does it encircle the entire cliff? Sonny nodded. I've passed the tower from various directions in the past, and every time I saw these large runes carved into the cliff. Cassie lingered for a moment. Then let's not hurry to reach the bridge yet. We should circle the tower and study the runes first. They proceed with just that. Staying under the cover of the forest, Sonny and Cassie slowly moved around the black cliff. A few times, they had to retreat and hide, especially so when the familiar sounds of snapping trees resounded from the mist, informing them that devouring beast was wandering somewhere nearby. In the process, both of them observed the progress of the other party tensely. Miraculously, Nephi's and Jet emerged from the caverns alive. The two of them must have managed to slay the corrupted terror after all. Judging by how bloodied their armor was, the battle had been a terrible one. Nevertheless, there were no wounds under all that blood. They had already been healed by Nephi's. Saint and Fiend were also in one piece, although the latter seemed worse for wear. Guided by Sonny's shadow, Neph and Jet were now cautiously traversing the misty forest. Around the time they found Effie and were almost impaled on her spear, Sonny and Cassie finally returned to where they had started from. The blind girl dismounted and was now sitting on the ground, tracing unfamiliar runes in the wet soil. There was a frown on her face. Strange. Sonny waited for as long as he could, then finally asked, well, can you make sense of them? Is it an enchantment? Cassie hesitated for a while. It seems to be. However, it's unlike any enchantment I have ever seen before here in the tomb of Ariel, in the Kingdom of Hope, and anywhere across the dream realm. Her expression was suddenly troubled. There are runes that do not seem to be a part of the enchantment as well. The spell does not translate them, so they are not exactly words. However, they are, in a way. It's like a code, or a puzzle, I guess. Sonny raised an eyebrow. Can you solve that puzzle? Cassie nodded. Yes, it's not particularly hard. Anyone knowledgeable in runic sorcery would be able to. He glanced at the black cliff, thought for a few moments, and asked, so what do these runes say? The blind girl hesitated. It's a bit strange. I don't quite understand the meaning, but if I'm reading it correctly, they say. Cassie remained silent for a bit, then turned to him and shrugged. I am the tower that Alethea of the Nine built. Sonny remained silent for a while, looking at the blind girl with a strange expression. Alethea of the Nine. The word sounded familiar. He had met a person with a similar name a long, long time ago. The young awakened swordsman from his first nightmare, the one whom he called Hero, the spell had called him Oro of the Nine. Was it a coincidence or something more? Sonny frowned. What did he really know about Hero? Not much. Hero had been alive during the twilight of the Golden Age, not long before the Doom War started. He was a soldier of a militant empire which worshipped war god and had conquered many lands. He was a warrior of considerable skill, and had already awakened at his young age. Now that Sunny knew how long it took one to awaken without the assistance of the spell, that fact seemed even more impressive. But Sunny had known that Oro of the Nine was not a simple person all along, not because of his skill and talent, but simply because of all the people in the nightmare. He was the only one whose name the spell remembered. That alone told Sunny that Oro was special. The spell appraised Sunny's performance in the first nightmare as glorious, which meant that he had deviated from the natural course of events to a great degree. What would have happened to Oro if Sunny had never taken the place of the nameless temple slave? The slave would have died, most likely, while the young swordsman would have survived. If he lived on and escaped the mountain pass, what fate would have awaited him in the future? And there was one more detail. What was it that he said to justify killing me? Right before their fateful confrontation, Oro had said something peculiar. Something about how he would have gladly faced the Mountain King to let Sunny escape if his life belonged to him alone. But it did not, because the young swordsman had sworn to fulfill an unencompassable duty of some sort. He couldn't allow himself to die because of it. What was the duty Oro had spoken of? And why was the name of another person of the Nine inscribed on the base of the Seeker's Tower? Who were the Nine? Sunny took a deep breath and glanced at Cassie. What do you think it means? The blind girl remained silent for a moment. Alethea must be the name of the Seeker who used to live on this island. He or she was proficient in sorcery, it seems. Other than that, it's hard to say. Sunny sighed. Have you ever heard of the Nine? He did not really expect a positive answer, but to his surprise, Cassie hesitantly nodded. I might have. If I remember correctly, Nephi's mentioned once that she had met someone with the same title. Sunny blinked. Huh. How would Neph have met one of the Nine? It must have been in her second nightmare. If that was the case, then these Nine seemed to have a habit of popping up in many nightmares. Just who were they? Or had been more precisely? Shaking his head, Sunny made a mental note to ask Nephi's about the person she had met, and turned his attention to the tower. All right, so this Alethea was the master of Windflower, and left a powerful enchantment to protect the tower. Cassie shook her head lightly. The island might not have been called Windflower back then. It's just a name by which people of fallen grace call it today. When the Seeker resided here, it was probably called Alethea's Island or something like that. Sunny shrugged. Whatever, in any case, how do we break the enchantment? He thought for a few moments, then asked, will destroying some of the runes work? Cassie remained silent for a while. Not just any runes, but if the key ones are erased, the enchantment will fall apart. I can identify the ones we need to destroy. Sunny raised an eyebrow. I thought you said that you couldn't make sense of this strange enchantment. The blind girl smiled. That's true. I wouldn't be able to recreate it, but breaking it is much easier than that. Nevertheless, don't be too encouraged. The runes are carved deep, and there are certainly measures in place to protect them. We'll have to shatter the entire slope of the cliff to erase them. He chuckled. Leave that to me. I might not be able to cut a mountain with one slash of my sword, but breaking a cliff or two shouldn't be a problem. Cassie nodded and fell silent, concentrating on identifying the key runes of the enchantment. Sunny, meanwhile, studied the black cliff. A long time passed. On the far side of the island, Nephi's Jet and Effie had hidden among the cliffs and shared a meal. Sunny watched them through the shadow and listened to the calming flow of their conversation. Neph was holding the guiding light, explaining how it had been found in the lost temple of fallen grace. Finally, Cassie was done with her task. The two of them moved stealthily around the black cliff and reached the spot where the string of most vulnerable runes was located. There, destroy that section. She pointed to where Sunny needed to strike, but he shook his head. Not yet. They had to wait a little longer. After about an hour, Sonny took a deep breath and rose. A whirlwind of scarlet sparks danced around his hand, forming into a black bow. He raised it and held the string. At the same time, somewhere outside the mist, the 7 suns were plunging into the great river. It was dusk. As the crown of twilight opened his soul to a flood of essence, Sonny drew the bow and activated its most powerful enchantment, Death Dealer. Usually, he would not have been able to use it more than a few times in a row. The strain on his essence reserves was simply too great. But right now, it did not matter. Releasing the string, he sent a black arrow flying. Then, without wasting even a second, Sonny grunted and drew the bow again. The second and third arrows streaked through the darkness before the first one even hit the target. Then, the silence of Windflower suddenly exploded into a deafening roar of breaking stone. It was as though a furious storm suddenly descended, with booming thunderclaps shaking the world. Black arrows struck the face of the cliff one after another. 1, 2, 3, 10. Despite how harrowing the force of these strikes was, the weathered black rock held. For a while, gradually a net of thin cracks appeared on its surface. Then, the cracks widened. Not long after that, small shards of broken stone shot into the air. Finally, the side of the cliff exploded and collapsed, tons of black stone falling into the turbulent waters of the wide moat. Sonny lowered his bow and swayed a little, utterly spent. His breathing was ragged. By his side, Cassie clenched her delicate fists in excitement. It had worked. The enchantment is failing. Sonny lingered for a moment. Yeah, I can see. Crap. There was no thrill in his voice. Out there on the bridge, the harrowing abominations that had been motionless before were already starting to move. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.